Let's bring in now the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Bob Menendez. Senator, thank you so much for being back on the show on what I know is a big and important afternoon for everybody.
Good to be with you, Holly. It is a big day.
Let me start then with what we just heard from President Biden. Are you satisfied with his announcement?
Look, I think the president's announcement is a good first tranche of sanctions, but cannot be the end of it. I think the sanctions on these particular banks, VEB Bank is one of the most substantial banks. It was on my list of banks in my legislation that I wanted to sanction. This is a bank that is definitely going to hurt the elites. It is a development bank. It's a payment agent for Russian government, so that's a good one. The military bank is also where the military financing flows through. That's a good one, too. Blocking sanctions are the most significant sanctions that you can render against a bank. But I think there are other banks that need to be considered. Sovereign debt, that's a solid action. We had that in our list as well. This means that Russia is not going to be able to raise money from the West. It's not going to be able to trade new debt in Western markets. That's very significant. I'm looking forward to see the specific oligarchs that are going to be sanctioned, because they're the ones who are helping Putin and holding his money. And that is a direct challenge to Putin. And of course, Nord Stream, I am very pleased to see the German government's action. I actually think that we should join them by lifting our waivers that we have on sanctions and proceeding with those as well. So it's a clear message to Putin. You're not going to get it online anytime.
Okay, so you believe this is an appropriate or significant first step. But as far as a second step and the potential next tranche of sanctions, for example, do you believe it would be appropriate to go ahead and cut Russia off from the SWIFT banking system? Or given what we've seen from Russia over the last 24 hours, is that something you'd like to see now?
Well, that is what I consider among the mother of all sanctions, right, is having them taken off of SWIFT. And it seems to me that while the president holds it in abeyance, it certainly is a real challenge to Putin and his thinking. Look, I think Putin doesn't think that any of these things were necessarily going to happen because it hasn't happened in 2008 and 2014. Now that it's beginning to happen, hopefully it will affect him in saying, well, I have to think about how far I go. But if he moves any further, then yes, I would be an advocate. I had that in my legislation as well.
I understand from our team that multiple sources are telling us that congressional leadership, committee staff will be briefed in just a couple hours about these sanctions. What are your biggest questions for the National Security Council staff who will be briefing relevant members of Congress?
Well, I'd like to know which are the oligarchs that are going to be sanctioned. I want to know what other banks are going to be considered for sanctions. I want to know what is the threshold for Putin to cross to consider, for example, your last question of SWIFT. And there are many other things that can be done as well. So those are some of the ones that, to me, are most significant.
Talk to me about the congressional responsibility, what the next step should be and how quickly it'll happen here, given what we've seen.
You know, we came a long way in working with our Republican colleagues. Unfortunately, we couldn't finalize the deal. But I think that this reality of an invasion by Russia into Ukraine only strengthens the resolve of what we want to accomplish. And so there's a lot more in common that we can join on that could send a clear and powerful message to Putin that it's the Congress as well, speaking in conjunction with the president in support of Ukraine and in the consequences to Russia. And I hope that we will get to that as soon as we get back. We're already precipitated some conversations as a result of the invasion. Hopefully we can reach that final common ground. There's a lot more. We agree on Nord Stream. We agree on sanctioning Russian banks. We agreed on sovereign debt, which the president has done. Right. We agree on oligarchs. So there's a lot here already that there is common ground, some of which the president has already exacted.
You mentioned the oligarchs. You know, your colleague, Senator Lindsey Graham, on the Republican side of the aisle, wants a task force created, a supplemental bill that would create a task force to go after those Russian oligarchs. Is that something that you feel like meets the moment at this point?
Yeah, I spoke to Senator Graham today, and I think it's an intriguing idea. If, in fact, there needs to be the wherewithal to specifically target the oligarchs, I'm for that. I think that there are existing laws, like Magnitsky, for example, that many of these actors can be pursued on. But I'm for doing whatever is necessary to send a clear and unequivocal message to Putin that you cannot change the map of Europe by force. You cannot take countries by force, and that you're finally going to face the consequences that should have probably happened in 2008 and 2014.
Senator, before I let you go, when you look more big picture at the geopolitical perspective and the geopolitical context here, how concerned are you by the role that China is, or rather is not playing right now?
Well, China had that joint press conference with Putin during the Olympic Games about pushing back on the world and the world's actions in terms of what Russia was threatening to do. I don't know if it really wants to embrace an invasion of another country. I also think that having these strong actions that the president announced in the first tranche, and that I hope will further continue, sends a clear message to China that there are consequences as well as it looks, for example, at Taiwan. And I think that there are global actors who are authoritarian in nature who are looking for the response of the West and the United States. And that's why it needs to be strong, powerful, unequivocal, and certain.
Senator Bob Menendez, thank you very much for joining us on a day when there is a lot going on. Really appreciate your perspective on this.